Hello and welcome to Express Sports Podcast. You're listening to Game Time with me, Mihir Vasavda, and we have a full house today. Amit's in Daisar, Vinayakk is in Rourkela, and Shivani is joining us from Pune. Different corners of the country, but we'll be talking about, something that's... Vinayakk and Shivani have been writing and following it about it very closely. Amit and I have been, I don't know. Amit, will it be fair to say that we've not been following it very closely and we'll leave it to Vinayakk and Shivani today?
Yeah, absolutely. We are never following anything closely.
Yeah, that's true actually. That's true for both of us.
I just think मेरा location मत बताया कर यार, because too many people angry at me, so never a good idea.
Address detailed बता दो, अभी तूने जो नया घर लिया उसका भी Amit and I will kind of refrain from our bad jokes, but we thought, something we wanted to do last week, but we couldn't come up with an episode because of some technical reasons, all fault of us. So sorry for that, but we are here to review the status of Indian badminton, something we've been wanting to do for a very long time. Post Paris, we haven't really got a chance to deep dive into Indian badminton. Thought the start of the year, we've seen two solid tournaments in India, Indonesia. There have been others too in Malaysia, I guess, as well. I thought it's a nice time to look back at where we are, not just in terms of the usual stars, Sindhu, Satvik Chirag, Lakshya Sen, where those are. We'll be talking about them, of course, in the later half of this episode. All of them embarking on a new journey, a restart post Paris. But I think it'll be apt to start with, I don't know if it's fair to say newer names. Some of these names have been around for a long time, but perhaps names we'll be hearing about a lot more during this LA Olympics cycle. So, Vinayakk, before we go to Shivani, just your observations from what you saw at the India Open, and then Shivani, maybe you can come up with how you compare it to the previous years and how you see them growing. I mean, we saw some really good, impressive one-off performances, but something to build on perhaps?
Yeah, hi Mihir. Yeah, the India Open was interesting in the sense that, before the tournament started, the organizers were expectedly bigging up the fact that the largest ever contingent from India in a 750 level event. That really didn't mean much because, there were a lot of promotions in the doubles categories, and eventually the quality came down to the familiar names in terms of going into the second round and further. So the largest contingent bit was a little misleading in that sense. But apart from the big names, the usual ones that we, regularly keep an eye on, the one that deserves to be highlighted is Kiran George from what he did in New Delhi. A couple of very impressive wins. One match, I think he won 27-25 in the decider that I think you also were there to watch. Quite an impressive fight that was in the first round. He also came up with a very solid comeback to reach the quarterfinals when he beat the French rising star Alex Lanier when he was 14-20 down in game one and went on to win that in straight games. So Kiran George deserves a mention in the sense that, he's been around for a while. Like you mentioned, it's not a new name. Or same age group as Lakshya Sen, Priyanshu, and, supposed to be the next rung of single shuttlers. The results have been hit and miss for him. So it was nice to see him get some consistency going at the start of the year. But obviously, I think he needs to get deeper into tournaments, maybe 500, 300 levels, and, start converting these performances into wins. I think that's probably the next stage for him. So Kiran was one of the ones who caught the eye apart from the big names at India Open.
Shivani, when we were discussing the rundown for this episode, you specifically mentioned Treesa Jolly and Gayatri Gopichand, the doubles pair. We've been talking a lot about Satvik Chirag the past two cycles, but do you think this will be their time?
I think there's still some way of, being the chief talking point of Indian badminton. They have to win the titles, and that applies to everyone. So till you actually sort of nail a title, difficult to say how things are going to pan out, because the proof is in the eating the pudding, frankly. But entering the top 10 and just the way they go about in matches against the top ranked players, they have a few wins against them. I think they have some 8 or 9 wins against top 10ers, even before they entered the top 10s. And also at the World Tour finals in December, they did show signs of challenging the biggest names. And women's doubles is notoriously difficult to kind of crack. To get into the top 8, there's a huge difference even in the top 8 and the number 9 and 10. So even getting that into the top 8 is going to be tough. But they're playing a good game. So there is promise there.
What's different, this time? I mean, the last cycle, they were there, but not so consistent. Vinayak mentioned Kiran George, and we'll be talking about him a little later too. I thought Malvika Bansod, I don't know how you look at it, but a couple of games she played there was interesting as well. But if we were to kind of look at why this could be Treesa Jolly, I wouldn't say this could be their cycle, but why this is the time where perhaps they can step up a level. What makes you believe that? Is that the progression chart or their on-court adjustments, something different that they've been doing?
No, the cycle definitely will belong to them if we're talking about 4 years. But let's say in the immediate next 1 year, I think they have to prove that they can win titles. By winning titles, it is like a string of matches, right? You have to string together 5 good matches in a week, back to back. I think they've had a few fitness concerns in the past years. So they have sort of stabilized on that. The game is growing with every passing day. But for every shuttler from India, I think fitness remains the absolute challenge. They have to be extremely fit to contend for titles, and that applies to these two as well. But the reasons why I think they will step up is, one, they have a very sort of dynamic game. They have a lot of variety. They can rotate well. They are, I think, 21, 22 right now. So this obviously the next 3-4 years is going to be like their peak. Also, in world badminton, there are going to be a few spots opening up with retirements and people sort of, moving away from the game from the top 10. So we are looking at them actually challenging contenders from their age group now. They've been playing older players and they've been playing far more experienced players. Now I think they will be contending with others who are sort of their level, their batch.
Shivani, also just wanted to check with you, you spoke about rankings, especially with Treesa and Gayatri. We look at the top 50 spots of across the BWF rankings of all the Indians who are there. I don't see too many names of Indian. Is that kind of concerning? If you look at just the top 50, let's say, like in men's singles, you have maybe like 4 of them. Lakshya, Pranoy, Priyanshu and Kiran George. In women, you have maybe 5 of them, including players like Anupama, Upadhyay, Akarshi Kashyap, Rakshitha, Ravi. Who do you see besides the regular names that we've always heard about, Are there these players who are going to have this insane cycle when it comes to, let's say, LA 2028? Is there like a wild card in that sense who maybe the rest of the world has not focused yet, but you see primed for a great year or great couple of years?
Probably 2 years away, but I think Unnati Huda, Anmol are very, very good potentials. There is also Shriyanshi Valishetty. There is Devika Sihag, who is the national champion right now. Both Devika and Rakshitha is relatively tall players. They bring the physicality onto the court. There are a few other names. So I think there is a crop which is sort of, they're bustling in that entire 40 to 70 ranking range. And it takes, I think, a couple of good tournaments, a couple of titles to, hit the top 30. So I'm not overtly worried about them being not too many in the top 50, because that can change pretty quickly. But yes, getting the big wins, getting the marquee wins, and stringing together a good week, I think that remains. I mean, there's a question on who and when they can actually achieve it.
Shivani, just before Mihir or Vinayak jumps in, this stringing together a good week, you said that 5 wins is what it takes basically to win a title. Just talk about what it takes to string together a good week in badminton in a sense, especially, like grueling sport where you need to have week after week up khel rahi hote ho, in a sense.
Right. No, so there's also the badminton schedule, which you mentioned. I mean, there are tournaments back to back, week after week. But I think more importantly, within a week, you have to peak towards the semis and the finals, and even cross the quarters. So you actually the intensity needs to increase as you go deeper into a tournament, right? Very predictably, we see players tiring out, and when they reach the new bunch of players, that is, because the fitness standards are not really at the absolute top tier. But yeah, stringing together 5 wins needs you to have very good recovery and to be at your best on the last 2 days. because that's when you'll actually be pulled into the very, very high intensity rallies. And that is what somebody like Sindhu had. That is what Saina obviously had. Your Shrikant and Pranoy and everyone. But I don't see so much of it in the new generation. And obviously, Satvik and Chirag ace it too. They're very good in the semis and finals. All matches are knockouts, but in the crunch, they are very good. But the new generation, I think the fitness levels are not. I'm not saying they're bad. They're improving and they will be expected to improve, but they are not at the level where they can be fighting 3 sets in a final or even getting there.
Vinayk, that's what we saw at India Open too, right? Whenever it came to crunch situations, whenever the match was dragging, you didn't often see the Indian players coming out on top. And I guess that will be one issue. Amit spoke about the new names that we could watch out for. You spoke to and met two of them, the two teenagers from the Gopichand Academy, Anupama, Upadhyay and Rakshitha Ramraj, wrote a beautiful piece on their friendship and how they've come along since joining the academy. What's in store for them and how do we keep our expectations guarded, or should we go all out with our expectations with them?
No, I think we have a long way to go before we increase our expectations from the younger lot. Like Shivani has mentioned, the problem seems to be, staying in the contest against the top players, right? Like, you don't have to even win, you don't have to go beat a Intanon or a Hokuara right at the start of your career. I mean, it'd be nice if they do. Even the score lines, you're losing games 21-7 or 21-10. Those are things that indicate that the staying power in rallies is still not there. I think Anupama played Tomoka, if I'm not wrong, at one of the events. She couldn't quite keep up with the pace or just the intensity that youngster, their age group, even probably younger, in Tomoka Miyazaki from Japan, what she could bring at this level, that's still not there, which is slightly concerning. But yeah, like Shivani says, there is a lot of time for all these. I just wish they focus a little more on the 300s and 500s and try and nail those titles, get their rankings built up, get their match fitness built up, because you go to a 300 and you put together 5 wins. Don't look at the quality of the opponents or whatever. You beat the people in front of you. Just the fact that you're able to put together that week that Shivani keeps talking about, if you can do that at the 300 level, it helps you kind of build up towards, India Open obviously is a 750, it's a home event, and if you get entry, you obviously have to play. I hope they don't focus too much on the 1000s and 750s right now and focus on the 300s and 500s and start putting together some wins so that they can get that going. Rakshitha was quite impressive, even though she lost against Anupama. There's slow conditions where Anupama is better off in the rally sort of game. Rakshitha is more attacking, has the smash, a little more deception. So she said she was the Tai Tzu Ying fan and she tries to, inculcate some of her gameplay into her game. So that wasn't really ideal conditions for Rakshitha in that match. But what little I saw, she looked quite impressive. So yeah, I would keep an eye out for her. And even slightly below this rung, Tanvi Patri has been talked about a lot. She's very young, 15 probably still. So someone to keep an eye out, not in this cycle, maybe the next one. But yeah, that's one name that needs to be highlighted. There are a lot of women singles players in that sort of 16 to 20, 21 age group right now who have potential. And I would be interested to see how many of them get selected to train with the new women's singles coach, Irwan Shah from Indonesia, which has been made clear that he is not PV Sindhu's coach by the federation and PV Sindhu as well. So that's going to be interesting on how many people he gets to work with. And if that sort of group training thing that BI is trying now is going to make an impact in sort of getting Sindhu to go to the next level, but also the next rung of players, how they deal with, the pressures of training with Sindhu and, translating that to results on the circuit. So I'm going to, keep an eye out on how the new women's singles coach thing pans out.
Shivani, you've been following badminton very, very closely for a very long time now. At least from my point of view, we've had always someone who's been, contesting at the highest level. भले ही एक या दो लोग हो, but it's always been there. At least in January, we've spoken about how many weekends of yours have been ruined by someone playing the semi-final or the final, and that's not happened. You've been enjoying too many weekends. Is that a scary prospect going further in this cycle, or are you kind of also optimistic about this younger bunch coming up and them finally, after a few months or a couple of years, finally kind of bridging this vast gap that we are seeing right now?
No, not scary. And pessimism is not a choice at all. There is no choice there. You have to be optimistic with whoever is keen to actually, get good at badminton. It's as simple as that. So this is the bunch that is in front of you, and you have to hope that they take the right decisions and they do the right things to actually, get at that level. But yeah, we are definitely in a sort of a rebuilding phase right now. Having said that, I think Satvik and Chirag, as well as Laksha, but more Satvik and Chirag, they do remain title contenders. Their game is also sort of undergoing a few changes, which were very, very necessary. They needed those things. So that will take some time to settle. I think it's getting more rounded. It's getting conditions agnostic because they used to be very good on fast courts, but not so much on slow courts. So, those things. So there are title contenders still at the top level. We can't really just completely write them off. But yeah, amongst the younger bunch, somebody like Anmol does have the temperament. She can just get into a tournament and she can go all the way. But the skills and the fitness has to sort of match up. I would expect the same from Unnati and from, even somebody like Anupama, but it's going to take time. And in men's singles as well, everyone is waiting for Priyanshu to take that next step. So there is that. Laksha remains, he still has to win a lot of titles. He has to get back into that entire zone where he's winning titles and he's making things look easier than they tend to be. There are other new names. There is Satish Karunakaran, again, a player who is rated pretty highly by a lot of coaches. And he can provide the sudden burst of sort of energy and go through a couple of tournaments and, pick a few titles in a very sort of sudden fashion. So there are names, but yeah, they have to get it done. And that applies to Gayatri and Treesa too. So I'm not scared, but yeah, I don't see an option to being optimistic. Let's put it that way.
Shivani, you spoke about a lot of these newcomers. You spoke about Laksha also. What is Sindhu kind of looking for? Because over the last couple of years, we've seen her, ever since she's parted ways with Park Tae-sang, we've seen her try plenty of coaches. Like we've had Mohammad Hafiz Hashim from Malaysia. We've had Agus Santoso from Indonesia. We've had a Korean coach, Lee Hyun Il. We've had 3 Indian coaches who she's kind of worked with. You have Anup, Vimal Kumar, the legendary Prakash Padukone. Just wanted to understand, what is it that Sindhu is kind of looking for in a sense at this stage of her career? She's, I think, 29, if I'm not mistaken, 29, 30. So at this stage, when she's looking at, let's say, LA, is she looking for coaches to kind of help her retool certain aspects? Or is she looking for one coach to stick to till that cycle gets over?
I think we might be partly sort of, looking at it all wrong and focusing too much on the coaches. The problem might just be with aligning her focus and her fitness and her... I'm not saying that she's not focused, but to get that focus and fitness and the tactics on court, all of it together at the same time, and be motivated to win a title, all of that has to align. And it somehow isn't. I don't really think it's about the coaches. But if I have to actually pinpoint where things go wrong for Sindhu, it is from the 17 point onwards in either the second game or the decider, where, I don't want to say she freezes because, she's won everything that there is except for the Olympics. But the thing is, she does stumble at that stage. She does need a coach who can actually guide her with very pithy, very specific instructions for that end game to close out matches. And that is lacking. That is not happening. That was a problem with Coach Park also. She couldn't really get that phase of the game going past the 17 point, let's say in a decider. And she has to figure it out of how she approaches that particular thing. Now, it is funny because, we're talking about a world champion here. We're talking about somebody who's won 5 world championship medals and 2 Olympic medals. But that is one area. And that's a very, very small change probably. She's not actually worked with Vimal Kumar. She's not been working obviously with Pulela Gopichand. Those are 2 coaches who are very good at these end games. But whoever is the next coach or whichever coach that she works with, I think that is the one thing that they will have to focus on to just help her, guide her through that end game. And I think she should be sorted. She's a brilliant player and it's just a very minute thing. but she has to get that right. And for the long-term goals, no, I mean, I can't speak for her. I don't know if LA is even on the horizon. It's too far. But the All England is something that she did want to win. Everyone wants to, and she definitely wants that title. So in the short term, I think that is one thing. And I think in one of Vinayakk's stories, she did mention that she is looking for a 6th World Championship medal as well. So that's a great motivation. That's a great goal to have. If she is looking to kind of extend that run of medals as well. But LA is too far.
Right. I think we'll start wrapping this up, but this conversation can't be complete without the two more stars of Indian badminton. We'll come to Lakshya Sen in a bit. Vinayakk, in Delhi, you spend a lot of time speaking to Satwik and Chirag, the new partnership they have with their coach Tan, who paired them up for the first time several years ago now. Satwik, before this tournament, he seemed pretty excited with, going back to Coach Tan and looking at what he brings to the table. He spoke very nicely about Chirag too, of how Chirag took care of him when he was recovering from his injury post-Paris, taking care of the tiniest of things. What's the sense you're getting from the pair there?
Yeah, I think like Shivani mentioned earlier, Tan coach, as they call Tan Kimmer, Tan coach coming back kind of helps them in the sense to reinvent, so to speak. It's not that they were stagnant or anything under Matthias Bo, and Paris, as heartbreaking as that was, I think it came down to like physical fitness, match fitness for the most part, that they couldn't achieve what they set out to in Paris. But yeah, there had been some chinks in the armor, like the serve return sequence. Some Indonesian pairs and Chinese pair started finding chinks there. So that's something that Coach Tan coach would try to iron out. One thing that I didn't notice during the India Open was they're trying to play a lot of cross shots. And I think Satwik said after the match that, one of the things that Tan coach told me after coming back was, I need the old Satwik back. By which he meant, the Satwik who played both men's doubles and mixed doubles and was not afraid to try these different shots, be inventive during the match. So we saw that a lot in the India Open, especially in the match against the Koreans in the quarterfinals, if I'm not wrong. So that was an encouraging sign. 2 semifinals to start the year in Malaysia and India. That is also an encouraging sign, given that they've been out of action for so long. I mean, of course, it's not the start that they had last year where they reached both finals. But yeah, as they're rebuilding, I think there is there's clearly certain things that they're trying to tweak and add to their game, because of course, they are one of the top pairs in the world and they have a X mark on their back when it comes to, teams trying to outthink each other. So tactically, I think Tan coach will also improve them. Matthias Bo was great at that, adding that tactical element to their game. So what Tan coach does in terms of identifying these smaller weaknesses, also like we saw in the semifinals against the Malaysians in India, Satwik and Chirag were both caught off guard by the flick serves and the flat game at the net by Gozi Fei, actually. And that is something that they know that they have to work on, because they're naturally taller players, so naturally more attacking. So when teams don't give them the height, keep it flat, how do they tackle that is something that they need to work on. So yeah, couple of things. Obviously, there are areas to work on, but in men's doubles, it's still very wide open. Probably the most wide open category in the world of badminton right now, I think. So Satwik and Chirag, if they are fit and they start the tournament close to 100% fitness, they are going to be challenging for titles whenever they play. And I hope they get the titles early in the year so that they can start building the confidence. All England would be great, like Shivani said for Sindhu. That's something that they would want to, because I remember one of the previous tournaments, they ruled their luck at All England when I think they lost to the Minions with the net court being playing a big role, when it looked like they would actually enter the semis or one of the later rounds. So it's something that's been on their mind for a long time. So All England would be a good place to see where they are, given they would have had a good training block with Coach Tan.
Shivani, just one last question from my side. I think we've kind of spoken about Lakshya in slightly, we only just touched upon it a little bit. Lakshya is somebody who we kind of became the biggest story from badminton in a sense from Paris because of the withering criticism that came his way, in a sense. You wrote a very fascinating piece the other day about his stats and what they reveal about his form. in the last couple of days, especially his troubles against Victor Axelsen or his troubles finishing games. Can you just talk about what's kind of ailing him? What is the panacea of his problems in a sense?
I think there's a bit of a confidence crisis when it comes to certain names where I'm not sure if he believes that he can beat them, which has to be supplemented with, increasing his skills and getting his fitness right up there. So when he believes that he is very fit, like if you remember when he spoke to us before the Olympics, if he thinks that he is very fit, and that's similar to Sindhu, he can actually just go and blast any opponent out. He came very close to doing that to Victor as well in the first set, but he couldn't. But yeah, it comes down to belief, but it's also a certain style of game. If an opponent gets very, very aggressive, I think he needs to find ways to kind of stem the tide. So that is one thing that's lacking. And there are phases in his game where he just sort of blanks out. So that has to be dealt with. And obviously, closing out matches, which seems to be a common theme across Indian badminton.
Well, at least we'll close out right now because our producer Shashank Bhargava has very politely told us that our time's up for this week. It's an interesting phase, as Vinayakk and Shivani explained this in Indian badminton, where our usual top names are in this kind of going back to the drawing board phase, and there are a lot of young players who are trying to punch above their weight and see if they can reach the heights that the earlier ones could. The good thing being that this is one of those rare years we've had post-pandemic where there's no major multidiscipline event apart from the World Championship that will be in the second half of the year. So there's plenty of time for all of them to kind of regroup, readjust and come back. We'll, of course, at game time be keeping an eye on how they're doing, and as and when something interesting happens, we'll be there with a fresh episode. You can always read badminton on the IndianExpress.com, and yeah, we'll be back, I guess, with a new episode of Game Time next week. Thank you for listening.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.